Hello world, welcome to season 2 of the Consulting Diaries. Series opener, we're here to talk about all things consulting. If you're joining us for the first time, I am literally thrilled to have you. Hit the subscribe button so that you stay up to date with everything consulting related on Championship Mode Collective. Today, we'll be talking about consulting for beginners in terms of what management consulting is, how I got into management consulting, and what I do on a day-to-day basis in terms of my work at PwC. So, without further ado, let's get to it. So, what is consulting? Well, there are a lot of terms related to management consulting, right? There's advisory, there's strategy consulting, and. But just to sort of simplify it, how it works for me is advisory services is basically you go and advise someone, and under advisory services you then have your consulting bid, you have your strategy work, and maybe you have your implementation, right? Depending on which organization you are, the definitions are different. But for me, it's advisory as the top, and then you have consulting, and then in consulting you have different types of consulting, right? You have strategy consulting, you have management consulting, you have tech consulting, you have people consulting. So consulting is like this umbrella, which basically talks about providing advisory services to an individual or another group of people. Now, how is advisory relevant? Mainly for three things, right? And all three support decision making or project execution. It's either the company or the person you're advising doesn't have the time to actually do it themselves, so we're selling time. 2, they don't have the resources, so they don't have the team, they don't have the people, they don't have the talent. And 3, they don't have the expertise. We see this mostly in tech implementations, right? So they don't have the expertise. So advisory literally falls into one of those three, and there are many other variations, right? But let's not get into that and just sort of cap it at a high level. But the story of management consulting. Some parts researched, some parts I filled in the blanks, but basically back in the day, 60s and 70s, big firms were really forming conglomerates, and what used to happen was people would sort of advise and consult the management of companies because they were the decision makers, so everything was top down back in the day. So because the services were provided mainly for the management, it became management consulting. Alright, so fast track to the 80s to the 90s, it really becomes industrialized. People are really getting into this, and we get to the 2000s, right, where you have really big corporates like audit firms and tax firms and advisory firms that sort of aggregated to form one company. So a super firm. Back in the day, before it was such a common thing this day, right? So it was literally a thing, right? You could have a firm that's audit, tax, advisory, implementation, software, and. So what then happened around the 2004 is there was sort of a scandal, the Enron scandal, attached with the Arthur Andersen accounting group. So pretty much the Arthur Andersen group advised Enron, and at the same time they were the audit partners of Enron. And what that literally means is they marked their own homework, especially when it came to the financial environment, because audit is all about just making sure your financial processes are and accounting standards are up to date, right? So it's literally marking your own homework. And then we know Enron collapsed, and Arthur Andersen literally followed suit with criminal charges and right. Then the SEC, Securities Exchange Commission of the United States, decided that these super firms should break up. So audit and advisory services could not be in the same building because there was no independent review, right? So then there was a phase after 2004 for the last 5-10 years where audit firms literally like divested out of their advisory services and sort of like either sold them off or spun them up to other companies, right? With creating like subsidiaries and it was cool with the SEC as long as you sort of like could understand and figure out the independence threads, the independence reviews, and all of that. But the SEC were really strict after that happened. Then what we saw happening during like the 2010s to currently now is audit firms wanted these advisory services back. So in some cases they just bought back their own firms, or they bought back like smaller firms, pushed them in-house, and then developed them into much bigger advisory services. So we're talking KPMG, we're talking Deloitte, we're talking PwC, right? Their advisory services really make up a huge part of their margin, but then they still have the audit part. So to make that happen, you know, like your independence reviews, your risk reviews must really be on point. And we've seen a couple of companies get into trouble again because of like independence and audit scandals and auditing and I'm not gonna talk about that, you know. We've been through a lot as a country, so let's just move on, you know. And that is literally like the short history of like consulting, and we're here today and the consulting industry just looks so different. Like you have purely consulting slash strategy houses, so that would be like your BCG, your Bain, and then you sort of like have super firms again, which is like your PwC, your Deloitte, your KPMG, your EY, commonly known as the Big Four, right? And then the other guys are known as like the Big Three of strategy: BCG, Bain, and McKinsey. There we go. It took me a while. So yeah, short story of consulting. Next steps. How did I get into consulting? Well, there's actually like 2 episodes on the Consulting Diaries season 1 where I talk about my journey in detail, but this would just be a summary, right? 2017, 2018, I worked at an innovation consultancy firm, and I was just really inspired by the type of work they were doing, how knowledgeable the people were. The CEO was just really so cool and inspired me, and I was like, oh, let me actually see what this is about and see if it'll sort of like work for me, you know. So I started like devoting my time to it, reading articles, doing case studies, reading books, you know, speaking to people at work just to understand their experience on management consulting, you know. And I really realized like this is such a cool different thing from engineering. I'm an engineering major, so it was just like very different because it's very business side as opposed to like engineering, math, solving problems. We do solve problems, right, as consultants, but different kind of problems, and we work with engineers as well, right? So I was really just fascinated with the whole journey, with everything. And yeah, 2018, used to enter a lot of case competitions, won some were not great, you know, because like I was still sort of like in the practice phase. And I still wanted to do engineering, right? I still wanted to be an engineering professional, so you know, applied to engineering, did all of that. And yeah, at that time the engineering industry was really like tough, so the jobs were really just hard to come by, and I literally just made a decision. I was like, you know what, it's cool. So I literally just decided to shoot my shot with consulting and see where it goes from there. Did the whole shebang, learn, case studies, prep, practice, had a couple of interviews in 2019, and fortunately I was able to choose PwC. And yeah, 2.5 years of PwC, going really well. But in terms of like how I got into consulting, that's literally like the short and sweet of it. But yeah, a lot of hard work, and you know, a lot of sort of like trusting the process and just doing as much as I can and hoping that I get in. And I did get in, so that was super cool. What my day-to-day looks like. Within PwC, I work in advisory, And in advisory, I work in the operations transformation. So that deals with like operations of the business, logistics, manufacturing, mining, procurement. So I specifically sit in the procurement team. I didn't know what procurement was until I actually got to PwC. So you learn something new every day, you know? So yeah, I sit in the procurement team. I have been at PwC for 2.5 years and I am a senior associate. So how progression works is you come in as an associate, then senior associate 1, then senior associate 2, then manager, then senior manager, then director, and then partnership. So I'm senior associate first year. So diving deeper into what my day-to-day looks like and what my responsibilities are. Let's talk about responsibilities first, then that way it'll make sense. So 3 main things I focus on a day-to-day. So the first part is like proposal building, or like building the business pipeline of the team. Then the second part is project execution. Then the third part is culture champion. So I am the culture champion of the team. We'll get into that in a lot more detail later. So proposal building. So this is basically like speaking to clients, when my managers and my partners like sort of like speak to clients, and then they get back to me and they pretty much say, Emmanuel, we spoke to the client, this is what they're saying, this is what their pain points, what do you think? Can you put together a proposal? Can you put together sort of like a solution, our point of view to address their pain points, right? So I've sort of like really been deep into that for like the last 3-4 months, because we're in proposal phase, right? You do a project, it ends, then you need to do proposal phase to get your next project. So it's really cool because like it challenges me in terms of like my business acumen, new side, and it also like learns new sides of my skills, right? Like I discover new sides of my skills in terms of like business acumen, understanding the client, understanding the industry. I'm not really good at that stuff. I didn't like that stuff when I started consulting, but now it's pretty cool. So proposal building, putting together like case studies of what we've done before, the teams we can use, the methodologies, how we approach things, how we do this over like, or we do this over 3 months, we do this over 6 months, or we do this in like 4 weeks, right? Because different services, different projects, different requirements, and different client pain points means your solutions have to be adaptable sometimes. Then we get into project execution. So this one is literally, if we won the proposal, we sort of like divvy up the team, and sometimes sort of like I work with the category lead, mostly done work on the chemicals part of the procurement business, or sometimes I sort of like I'm able to lead the category by myself, because sometimes the client's needs changes and like resources are shifted around, and then sometimes you're just left on the work stream. So that's how it was. But at all times you have your manager. You can speak to your manager, you can speak to your partnership, you speak to the client. So it's not like you're left on your own. And what I really like about my work and with the team that I'm in is I am empowered to sort of like make day-to-day decisions, right? So like if speaking to the client and then this comes up or that comes up, I literally like can be like, okay, cool, let's do this, let's do that. And in some cases, if it's really tough, I just confirm it with my manager. One thing that I really love is that we're empowered to make decisions as like associate on the ground, and that sort of like gives me fulfillment in my work. So yeah, the last part is me being the culture champion of the team. So I mean, naturally, knowing who I am, my personality. My boss came to me and was like, don't you want an opportunity to lead the culture portfolio? And I was like, say no more. So basically what that sort of like entails is just being responsible for the cultural fiber of the team. What we're learning, are we sort of like keeping ourselves accountable in terms of like our mindsets, being inclusive, forming relationships, how do we interact with other teams in the business, that culture element, don't want to say vibe, because like it's not really have to do with vibes, but I guess it could be a synonym, right? Then the other part is like the social stuff. So yeah, it can get taxing at times, but you know, if you manage everything quite well, so like I get suggestions about socials, when it comes to team celebrations, when it comes to project closeouts, when it comes to individual celebrations, you know, like birthdays, milestones in their personal life and at work. So I'm sort of like responsible for just bringing that out of the team and just making the culture visible, you know, which is really cool. About 1 year in, so far so good. So this year, hoping to like really ramp it up and make it more consistent. See what I did there? And just make it more consistent and more present in the team. So those are sort of like my 3 responsibilities: the proposal building, project execution, and then the being a culture champion. What my day-to-day looks like, you know, I'll just pick a random day or like the next week. So my day starts at like 6 p.m. and I'm usually in bed by like 11:30 p.m. So we can literally run through a 24-hour cycle, right? So 6 a.m. I'm up, I do the workouts. The workouts usually take me an hour. Meditation, calisthenics, all of the good stuff. Then between 7 to 7:30 is shower, dress up, and breakfast. I'm really big on working from home, so you know, shower, dress up, kitchen, literally like happens quickly, and there's no pressure to like catch public transport to go to work, right? Then pretty much 7:30 to 8, I'm sort of like just figuring out what I need to do for that day, zoning in, understanding my tasks, checking my calendars, what I need to prioritize, what I need to deprioritize. And most of the time I start working at 8, so 8 to 5, that's when you catch me at PwC. That's when you catch me at PwC. And I mean, if I think about Monday, there's a new project that came through, so my manager has put me on that, so we'll have a meeting for that, so like a 30-minute session. But before that, I want to spend like an hour, 2 hours just going through the data related and how the opportunity came about. That will just allow me to ask better questions and sort of like understand what the client wants and what we would like to deliver. Then I also have a couple of other things to do in terms of like, we sort of like have like this converse presentation that we have to prepare for, so I'm also running point on that. That will sort of like take me an hour. I need to speak to my boss. He's coming back tomorrow from like a couple of days of leave, so I might not get time with him tomorrow because he'll be so busy with 150 emails or something like that. So see, that we deprioritize for Tuesday and then maybe prioritize something else, right? So by that time it'll be like lunchtime, 30 minutes lunch break. But oh, I should also mention I take frequent breaks, so my breaks are usually between 10 to 30 minutes. If I'm more stressed, the breaks are longer. If the work is actually quite nice, then the breaks are shorter, right? Then in the 4 hours, depends if something comes up or if I start building the proposals after speaking to my manager. So like those 4 hours will usually be me in deep work, like sort of like actually doing work. And then by 4:35, if my manager is available, I can either have a chat with him or push it to Tuesday and then sort of like close out the day. Then what I sort of like do in my personal life is I sort of like unwind a bit, de-stress, prepare for like my evening studies. So like finishing off my masters or like creating content or figuring out what I want to write or talk about, you know. So like that goes from like 7 to like 10 or 7 to like 11 at the worst. And then sort of like the last 30 minutes are me figuring out what the next day comes with, what we need to prioritize, brushing my teeth, and then getting into bed by 11:30 so that I can hit at least 6 hours of sleep. So that's what a day-to-day sort of like looks like. So what's next for me at work? I already talked about the whole culture champion stuff, really hoping to build that much more strongly. But yeah, I want to make manager. I want to make manager in the next year, which is 2 grades above my current grade, so that's a double promotion. But I've spoken to my coach. He thinks it's possible. I just need to speak to my boss still, or show him this video, whichever happens first. Okay, let me behave. Yeah, it's gonna be tough, right? Because I'm also trying to do like the digital content thing really well, and also just try to do like top class consulting. So it's going to be a lot to balance, but I think I've accepted the challenge. So let's see what the next 8 months hold. Yeah, should be fun. Now, I make consulting sound fun and glamorous, right? That's because it really is. It really is. But there's a lot of hard work that goes in, a lot of dedication, and a lot of hard moments, right? It is not an easy place to be. Check out the video on screen to check out the dark side of consulting, where I talk about the exact demands that consulting will ask from you and how to prepare for them. Alternatively, check out the championship mode, staying in championship mode playlist, where I talk about how to balance and maintain your energy to get more out of your performance. In the meantime, stay in championship mode.